That's great. So what do you think of the Fayetteville Innovation District, what you've seen? Pretty cool. You saw our spot over there in the Pryor Center, and you saw the Fab Lab, and this is the Brewer Family Entrepreneurship Center. Anybody know the history behind the Brewer Center? Did you hear some of that, what this is all about? So the name is important. The Brewer name is important. Clete Brewer and his dad created a staffing company some years ago in the 90s that grew into a $1 billion market capitalization, publicly traded company. He was a 29-year-old CEO of a publicly traded staffing company. So that Brewer name, maybe you don't hear that quite as often as you might hear Walton or Hunt or Tyson, but he built a great big business when he was very young with his dad. Since that time, anybody ever hear of Sport Clips or been to Sport Clips? Mm-hmm. So he joined Sport Clips, Clete Brewer did, after he finished and exited Staffmark, and he took it from 30 franchises to 700. And right now, Clete is helping run New Road Capital Partners, which is a venture capital firm based in Bentonville. So we're really lucky to have him. But it just goes to show you that entrepreneurship is really not constrained by age. You can build great things when you're in your teens, your 20s, at any stage of life. So how many of you consider yourself entrepreneurs today, or aspiring entrepreneurs? Okay, so there's a few of you. How many of you come from homes where you've got family members, parents, or siblings that are building and running businesses today? So a bunch of you. Well, what we're going to talk about today is a process that makes going from mind, from what you have in your mind, that concept you have for your business, to market more cost effective, more efficient, and more realizable. We're going to talk about some of the tools that you can use to remove the risk from what you're doing. My background is I've been a senior executive in 3 Fortune 500s. I've run 9 startups. I've made about 80 investments in early stage businesses. I spent some time at the university and still am there and on an adjunct teaching basis. But I am a serial entrepreneur by affliction or addiction, however you want to look at it. That's what I love to do. All right, so we're going to launch into this. We're going to talk a little bit about lean startup methods. This is not going to be all lecture. We've got some video content. We're going to actually put you to work on doing a lean canvas. We're going to make it easy for you so you don't have to go through the ideation stage. We're going to give you a particular asset that you can use as the basis for your thinking. We'll break up into groups and you'll actually go through the process. So it's not going to be all lecture. But we will talk about lean startup. How many of you have been through the lean startup, lean canvas at least once before? You've had some exposure to it. So a bunch of you. All right, so it's not completely foreign. All right. This is kind of what, whoops, I skipped ahead there. This is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about hunting the unmet need, how to find that problem or opportunity that is not yet solved. We'll talk about this idea of culture, which is super important. So starting a business with the idea of answering that, why should we exist? Why does a business like this need to exist? How are we going to operate as a team? What are our key values going to be? What's our vision for the future? So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. We'll then go through the lean startup process. We'll give you some of the background on that. We'll kind of bring you back to the things that you all learned in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade about scientific method and hypothesis testing. Then we'll actually do the exercise. We'll talk a little bit about customer development. We won't have time today to go out and actually do good, what we call qualitative research or customer development, but we'll talk about how to do that well. And then there's some other things in the second module that if we have time, because I want to put a lot of emphasis on actually getting you involved in the practicality of going through the exercise. We'll talk about sales and marketing, venture finance, a little bit about intellectual property, and then maybe some words about how to do a really effective 60-second pitch and full presentation, because that's an important part of being an entrepreneur is you're constantly selling. You're either selling a new customer, you're selling an investor, or you're selling your team and new employees on why they should join you in your venture. Okay, so this idea of mind to market, taking something that you think is a great idea or that you see or observe as an unmet need and figuring out how to effectively get it to market. That's what we'll talk about first. And in hunting that unmet need, there's some techniques that really make it easier versus harder as you go through it. So within that, you have the idea, what do you do next? Scientific method, hypothesis testing, Small iterations in your process is kind of a key point. We'll talk about things that are must-haves from a buying standpoint versus nice to have. If you build a business around a product or service that people have to have, it's a whole lot easier to sell than if it's something where you have to evangelize because they might want it, but they don't know they want it yet. For example, nobody really needed Twitter, right? Nobody really needed Facebook. There was already Friendster and MySpace. In that case, you had to build a following, build a tribe of people that were interested. We're going to talk about incremental versus revolutionary ideas. So an incremental idea is people were already doing a lot of retail when Walmart came along. But the incremental change there was they were going to go to places that had less than 50,000 in population and make a really cost-effective supply chain to deliver super low-cost products in those areas. That was an incremental change that ended up ultimately being revolutionary. It's important to know about the competitive landscape. We'll talk about some of the ways to think about that. And then a lot of people come to me, the entrepreneurs, we see about 1,000 entrepreneurs a year. They'll come in and they'll say, I've got this great idea and I know it's worth $10 million. Ideas are commodities in reality. And we're going to talk about the importance of execution, actually building something, versus just having what you think is a great idea. So after you've had that epitome, where do you start? Where do you start? The first thing is you have to have this sort of undying curiosity about what's going on in the market. Become a student of the market that you want to serve. Learn as much as you can possibly learn about what others are doing to try to address that unmet need. Find out what are the existing alternatives. A lot of times new entrepreneurs will come into us and they say, you know, we've got this great idea for a product or service and there's absolutely no competition. That tends to mean one of two things. Either it's a really terrible idea for a product or service and nobody wants it, or they haven't done proper research to find out where those alternatives are, or in some cases, it could just be the status quo, right? The status quo may be the competition. People don't realize that they need something new. The question you ask yourself is, does this solve a real problem? Is it really a problem? Is it just a better mousetrap, or is it something genuinely that's real and unique that people would pay to have solved? Does it matter? Is it consequential? Is it a big enough market to be interesting? You can build a great business in a small market. You can dominate that market. As it turns out, if you want to raise outside investment, most times it has to be about $1 billion market opportunity. It's not to say that every idea you come up with has to address that big a market, but for it to be interesting to investors, it does. So here's some other things to think about. Is the product or service that you want to create something where there's demand pull? So the market is hungry for this. There's a real need for it. It's obvious that something needs to be done better. Or is it something where it's a technical insight that occurs, a new capability that arrives, a new feature or function where you have to evangelize. You have to convince the market that it was something that they need that they didn't know they needed. It's important to understand the difference, and both have merit. But I'll tell you, as it relates to sales cycle, which how long it takes you from someone finding out about your product or service to actually closing a deal and selling, if you're product evangelizing because it's something that people didn't know they needed, that's going to be a long period of time until people understand why the product has benefit, the service has benefit. So understanding these dynamics and where you fit and where you are in the scheme of things is really critically important. Is this something that people really need? How do we know? How do we prove it? Okay. There's a guy named Peter Thiel who he's actually most recently made news because he's an investor in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. But he was one of the early investors in PayPal and in Facebook. He's written a book called 0 to 1, which I'd recommend you take a look at. He's got some basic ideas about how to build something big, not just incrementally better, but really big. He says that in a world with globalization, and we are an interconnected world, globalization without new technology is unsustainable. So if we're going to do global commerce, we have to have this interconnectivity, this interdependence, this sharing of information, etc. He said if you want to create and capture a lasting value, you have to build a differentiated business. So you can't compete on the basis of price as a startup most times because you don't have the scale. You don't have the ability to take advantage of the economies of scale that others might have. So you have to be differentiated. And from the standpoint of someone that's going to purchase a new product or service from you, whether it's an enterprise or an individual customer, They have to believe that if they're going to take a risk on buying from a startup, your product or service is going to be exponentially, or at least 10 times better than what else they might get. Final thing is, he said and here he says it, proprietary technology must be 10 times better. The other thing is, every startup should be very focused in the beginning. They should start on the smallest possible market that they can serve to prove that there's actually demand for what they're doing. So Guy Kawasaki, who's another person that pontificates about a lot of this stuff, that talks about a lot of, he was the chief product evangelist at Apple. He says, niche thyself. And what he means by that is, find the smallest interesting group of early adopters and sell your product or service to them first. Begin to build that tribal following with people that are true believers early on. And the final thing is, every great business has to be built around some kind of special sauce, some kind of hidden secret, something that's very hard to duplicate or replicate. Now, these thoughts that we hear in 0 to 1, you're going to find coming out in the way we talk about the lean canvas as well. So keep some of this in mind, and if you get a chance to get that book, 0 to 1, I'd recommend you give it a read. Oh. The other thing is understanding where you fit, the positioning. As you begin to get more into thinking strategically about what you want to do, putting together kind of a map of where the competition sits, what they offer, what they do, their positioning, and where you fit is really important. That's how you can begin to build your own competitive differentiation. If you wanted to get into the electric car space, and you're not Elon Musk, and you're not kind of in a position to put $1 billion of your own money into it, you'd have to think specifically about, how are we going to be different? What are we going to do that's significantly different than Tesla or Fisker or any of those others? And is there even an opportunity for a new entrant in that space? So the understanding a competitive landscape is pretty important. And then there's the question of, what's that big idea worth? Ideas are commodities. There's about a 7.5 billion to 1 chance that your great idea is not novel. Somebody on the planet has thought about it. Somebody has thought about it, and they're probably doing something about it. So how do you go from an idea to creating value in your business? Value for your customers, value for your team, wealth creation for yourself. You focus on execution. That earliest bit of execution is where you begin to gather the evidence that someone would actually buy what you're doing. Execution matters. Ideas are great. They can be a good starting point, but your ability to actually deliver value to a customer, something that they would pay for, is where the game is really won and lost. The evidence in execution is traction. When we talk about traction, we're talking about sales traction. We convince these 5 customers to pay X price for Y service, and they're going to buy it again based on having had a good experience with us. If you get traction from an investor standpoint, and really from a customer standpoint, as you begin to roll up customers, it means less risk. And investors and others want to associate with brands that are not going to go out of business, that are going to be a good bet. And that's how you generate value. So execution is really an important piece. About 10 years ago, a little more than that, this guy, Derek Sivers, came up with a context, sort of an equation, to think about the value of ideas versus the value of execution. And what he said is, and you can kind of study this visually, but he said, even if you have a brilliant idea, if your execution's lousy, that multiplier of 20 is probably still worth $20. It might be worth somebody buying you a cup of coffee, right? But if you have a good idea, which has a multiplier of 10, and brilliant execution, that could be a $100 million company. So think about that from that standpoint. The relative weight of the idea, or the novelty of the idea, or even the patentability of the idea, versus having a really good team that can deliver something of value. Discount everyday low pricing retail was probably not a brilliant idea. It wasn't novel when Sam Walton thought of it. But there was brilliant execution. There was brilliant execution. And there was such a focus on execution that they said the basic premise is, we're going to save money, and people will live better through our everyday low pricing. That's thematically the whole thing for Walmart today. It was brilliant execution around a good idea, not a brilliant idea. So think about that as you go through this. There was a guy named Peter Drucker, who's one of the management and leadership gurus of the 20th century, that said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. He allegedly said this in a meeting with Ford. Now, we spend a lot of time thinking about strategy and business plans and all the other mechanical stuff we're going to talk about. But sometimes we forget that the number one asset of any business is the team. And it's how we interact with our shareholders and with our customers and with each other. So when he said this, he was really trying to imply that whole idea that you got to really focus on making sure you know why you exist, you know where you're going, what the vision is, you know what you do every day, and you know how you're going to treat each other, the elements of culture. Have you heard culture talked about in any context before as it relates to business? Have you talked about that? Well, it's super important. We're going to spend some time going through it. So we'll talk about purpose, vision, mission, core values. And we'll start with purpose. So this is a statement where you say, why do you need to exist? Why does that business need to exist? If you start a business just because you want to make big stacks of $100 bills, you're ultimately probably not going to build a great business. Start with some meaning in mind. Why does it matter? What wrong are we going to right? What are we going to do in the marketplace that is unique and novel? Why is it going to matter? Businesses that answer this purpose question well have long lives, multi-generational lives. The average lifespan of any business, even those that go public, is 44 years. And yet, there's businesses like Barbour, who makes really cool weatherproof clothing out of Scotland that's been around a couple hundred years. And why is that? It's because they have purpose. They have focus. They try to deliver meaning. So think about this. As you go through this lean canvas exercise, think about why would you get into this business and why would it matter to anyone? The vision is, again, and these are not long statements and paragraphs and lots of words and jargon. It shouldn't look like something you'd see in a Dilbert comic strip. It should be really easy to understand. The vision is a statement of aspiration. Where do you want to be with this business in 10 years? How do you want to be viewed in the marketplace? What impact do you want to have? It's a vision. And think about it. If you think about it in terms of stakeholders in any business, you've got your team, your customers, and your shareholders. And sometimes you might also say, the world on a larger scale. So as you think about that, think about what do you aspire to be? Put that down in words that matter. This is where we want to be in 10 years. It can't be time bound. The mission or mantra should be short. Again, this shouldn't look like something that has 3 paragraphs of meaningless words. It should be something very clear, and it should say what you do every day. So as you think about why you exist, as you think about what you aspire to be over a time frame, this tells what you're going to do every day to make that a reality. Does that make sense so far? Okay. And then this is a good example. So Patagonia, great brand, great reputation. They're going to build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. Now you could argue this is maybe a better example of purpose rather than mission. It does tell some of what they do every day, but it's also a pretty good statement of why they should exist. Does it make sense? And there can be a little bit of fuzziness and overlap between these things. And then finally, core values. So we've talked about why. We've talked about what we want to be, the vision for the future, that statement of aspiration. We've talked about the mission, what we do every day, and mantra. The core values are what's important to you? How are you going to operate? Honesty, integrity. It's typically short statements that talk about how the team will operate. So a good example, American Freightways, which was the fastest growing, less than truckload transportation carrier in the country between 1982 and 2000, they had 5 core values. They were going to take care of their customers. They were going to take care of their team. They were going to honor their commitments. They were going to operate safely. And they were going to have fun. Those 5 things defined the core values of that culture. And it was pervasive. These are not things that you put down on a piece of paper so that you've got good marketing fodder for Wall Street analysts or for anyone else that might want to look at them. These are things that have to be meaningful to you. They come from your heart. They come from the team's consensus of what kind of company they want to be. Companies with great cultures, people don't want to leave. Their ability to attract and retain talent is amazing. People with cultures that are questionable or where what the leaders and the people actually do doesn't match what they say, they have high churn rates. People leave. You might lose 40% of your people a year. unsustainable. So the culture needs to be the core of everything you do in building a great business. And we spend time on that before we launch into the mechanics of the Lean Canvas, because this gets overlooked so often. People are like, yeah, that's the soft stuff. Why does that matter? Culture is everything in getting the business right. Makes a lot of difference. This is a good example of a local company that's got a very strong culture, is faith-based, driven by some really good values. They talk about integrity, relationship, excellence, journey, and legacy. These are pretty good, pretty easy to understand, not too complicated. And the other benefit of having a strong culture, a well-defined culture, is that everybody in the company ought to be able to say what it is, and it ought to be the basis for which that you use to find new customers based on your culture. Is it a good cultural fit? To bring in investors, is it a cultural fit? And to hire or fire people. Is what they're doing in line with our culture? Is this somebody that would be a good addition to our team? Or if not, is this somebody we have to let go and invite them to their future elsewhere? Questions about any of that? Is any of this foreign? Have you heard this before a few times? Okay. All right. Oop. Let's go back. So now what? This is where we're going to get more into the lean startup. We'll talk a little bit about customer development. We'll be objective. We're going to talk about this willingness to divorce yourself from the love affair you have with your own ideas. You have to be a little bit of a business mercenary when you go through this process. You have to kind of take that third-person view of your ideas and be really objective about what you observe and what you learn from the market to do a good job in building a viable business. If you want to do some additional reading on this, the book by Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, is great. Business Model Generation gives really good background on Business Canvas. Steve Blank wrote this book called The Owner Startup Manual. And the one we like the best, which is kind of the easiest to follow and it's used in most of the universities locally, is Running Lean by Ash Maurya. You can look at leanstack.com, that's LEANSTACK.com, and Ash Maurya has got a website there and he talks about the book, and it's really pretty good stuff. So here are some of the painful statistics, and I'll give you sort of the context of somebody that has been in the startup game and in business since 1990. Failure rate is really high in new ventures. Somewhere around 85% of all businesses fail. And part of the reason why they fail, based on some study, is that, number one reason, they're building something that no one wants. They have that confirmation bias of finding people that reinforce that, gee, that's a great idea, you ought to go do that. They don't do the hard work to really get objective information about their the concept around their new venture. Sometimes it's because they hire poorly, and some more of the times it's because of lack of focus, but the number one thing is they build something that no one wants. The other thing that's kind of important, for any of you that are thinking about doing something in technology, there's a sad statistic that Carnegie Mellon came up that said only 4% of all software development projects finish on time, within budget, while meeting the requirements of the customer. 4%. That means 96% of the time, software development, technology development fails to meet those. And why is that? That's again because people lose sight of what did the customers really want and how do we know. So now that leads us into the Lean Canvas methodology. The goal of the Lean Canvas methodology is to improve the odds. As a society, we need to make sure that we're being more capitally efficient, that we're really doing a better job as entrepreneurs in being cost effective in putting new products and services into the market. And it is pretty scary in that the frequency of failures is really early in businesses. The 1 to 5 year failure rate is really high. That's where most of the failures occur. So we need to figure out a way to create more winners. How are we going to do that? We want to shift this curve so that those early failures are reduced, and so the 5-year survival rate and the opportunity to build the next billion-dollar business is increased because you get through all these things that typically kill businesses early on. So what are the flaws in the conventional wisdom? What have we thought over the years? How did we all grow up, those of us who went to business school and have MBAs, and where were we thinking as it relates to small business and startup? What was wrong with it? Well, we had to refer to the great philosopher Mike Tyson. He said, everyone has a plan until he gets punched in the face. And what he meant by that was all of his opponents, when he was actively boxing, when he was world champion, would have some kind of game plan, well thought out, how they were going to approach him. And all that goes out the window once he hits them with that first left hook, right? It's the same thing in business planning. What startups do is they're constantly in this sort of transition and this search for finding, where am I going to find a product that actually meets market need? It's a search. It's a lot of experimentation and iteration. They're also searching for the business model fit. How do I know that I'm priced right? How do I know that I've got the mechanics of the business model right? How do I know all that? It's a search. So startups are constantly in this state of search. They're not just smaller versions of big businesses. But what we used to believe was exactly that. And in great business form, we were all really good at spreadsheets. We would do, an operating plan and a financial model. Let me go back one. So this 5-year forecast, we'd just do that spreadsheet mechanics. We'd increase our revenues each year, and through some miracle, at the end of year 5, we'd be a multi-million-dollar company. And it never worked that way, because the fidelity of your information and forecasting is always bad. You don't know what you don't know, right? Your assumptions are based on maybe your experience, but not any actual experience in the market with this particular product or service that you're trying to launch. So the theory was you just execute the plan and off you go and it will all work. And forecasts in general are an exercise in fiction. They're wrong from the instant you do them. So for startups, this is no bueno, right? This is not the way to go. And this is the guy who is kind of the godfather of the lean startup movement. He's actually out at Stanford University. He was the one that I think had some personal experience that led him to use this idea of being capital efficient with your time towards the lean canvas. And he said, here's an actual photo of what happened when his first business plan had contact with the customers. And it kind of looked like the Crimean War, right? It was a total massacre. It was bad. It was terrible. It made no sense. All these great strategy and tactics he had just weren't going to work. And his conclusion is that no business plan survives the first contact with the customers. And it's not to say that planning is bad. It's to say that you should do it in an iterative process. You develop assumptions, you test them very quickly, you add more detail to your thinking, and off you go. But you don't write a 75-page business plan and never leave the building and never talk to customers. That's the key point here. And the other thing, too, is famous guy that created Total Quality Management that was really the architect of putting the Japanese auto manufacturers to the worldwide leaders that they are in automobiles was a guy named Edward Deming. And he was a very data-driven individual. He said, in God we trust and all others bring data. So as we go through this and you think about what you're going to say about your concept, as you think about proving or disproving your assumptions about your business, try to avoid using adjectives in the description of what you've learned. So an adjective, a word like better or best or all those sorts of things, they tend to look like opinions. Whereas data, based on factual evidence that you've gathered to actually trying something in the market, is hugely valuable. If you talk to 100 people in an unbiased way to determine whether or not they have some interesting problem that they would pay to have solved, and 75 people come back and they have that problem that you haven't led them towards, that they sort of self-selected into talking about, then you know you have something. And I'll give you some rules and some techniques that we can use to be good at that as we go. So the basic idea behind lean, just to put a fine point on, is any activity that doesn't add stakeholder value is waste. So writing a 50-page business plan before you know whether or not the business model is going to work would be defined as waste. Now, it's a good exercise if you've never been through it from an academic standpoint, but from an actual venture standpoint, it's a waste of time. It's not a good use of time. And the solution is the lean canvas methodology. So I'm going to show you a little video here, which will hopefully give you a really clear view of the benefits of this approach.
This is the story of Beth, her friend Carl, and an idea they believed could become a great business. It's the story of how they succeeded, and if you're an entrepreneur or anyone with a great idea, it could easily be your story too. But let's begin at the beginning. See, even if you have a great idea, success is far from assured. That's because for every great idea that has shaped our world, there are thousands of seemingly great ideas that have flopped. In order to succeed, a great business idea needs a great business model, and they're not the same thing. Once your idea meets the world, it will meet customers. If they don't care about the problem your idea solves for them, it's game over. But even if customers love your value proposition, you can fail if your business model is not scalable and financially sustainable. You'll need to find reliable channels to reach and acquire your customers. You'll need to build an infrastructure that won't collapse as your business begins to grow. Failing to do just one of these things can mean death to your business, however great your idea is. That's why your first work is to search for the right business model, to map this world of challenges so it can be tamed and organized, allowing you to explore it, manage it, and plan for it. What if there was a tool that could help you with this challenge, simply and visually? A tool that makes it easier to stress test your ideas, track your progress, and avoid breaking the bank along the way. What if it was possible to design and test business models in a way that gives your idea a better shot at rising to the level of the great businesses that are shaping our world? It is, and though the journey for these guys, and for you, won't be a walk in the park, all you'll need is your creativity, willingness to work, and passion for your idea. We'll give you the rest.
Okay. So questions about that? Is that helpful? Makes sense? Now, the thing I'd say about that is, by all means, you can go on YouTube, watch that video. There's a whole series of them. They are tied to the template that Steve Blank uses in Lean Canvas. It's a little bit different than the one Ashmore uses, but the principles are the same. The whole idea is around assumption testing and not assuming anything without having tested by talking to actual customers. Okay, this is just a reiteration of the books. Make a note of these. These might be books that you would want to take a look at. They're all relatively inexpensive to buy. And this is the actual process we'll go through today. The first thing is you go through and you write down a bunch of guesses on the Lean Canvas, and we're going to review it here shortly. That you document the plan, 1 page. These are short summary statements that are not written in number 4 font, right? You don't try to get every word you're thinking of in there. It's just the key things, the headlines. The next thing, once you do that, is you try to identify the riskiest parts of the plan. Risk are the things that can kill your business. Those are the things that will lead to failure. So you identify the riskiest parts of the plan. The third thing you do is you would systematically test. So how are we going to validate or invalidate that these key components about our plan are right or wrong? How are we going to know that? We're going to go out in the market and check it out. And you can see more about that at leanstack.com. But this is the process that we follow. And your goal is, if you remove risk from the plan, your chance of failure is lower, your chance of success is higher, your opportunity to attract either a lender or an investor or a customer is going to improve. So this is what it looks like, the one that we use. You've got the problem. You actually start from the outside in, and we'll go through that. But the problem is short statements. And sometimes people say, well, what if it's not a problem? It can be an unmet need. You can translate problem into unmet need. What's the unmet need that the world would be interested in? And you get real specific. Who are the customer segments? Who are the early adopters? Who are the people that would actually pay for this? Who are the people that would influence people buying this? So sometimes there's a difference, right, between the user of a product or service and the people that actually pay. So when you get into customer segments, you think about who are the targets that would actually buy something. Then you look at the solution, and it says here the top 3 features under solution. Think about it in terms of benefits. When you buy an ultra high definition TV, you're not buying it because of all the technical specs. You're buying it so that you can watch the national championship game and see it very clearly, so that movie you want to watch at home is going to be a theater-like experience. So think about solution in terms of the benefits. What are the benefits that convey to my target market? We've got things in here like unique value proposition. So for Walmart, the unique value proposition is they have this super efficient supply chain that allows them to deliver everyday low pricing, and ultimately that's going to, save money and people will live better as a result. That's a unique value proposition. It should be something memorable. It can't be the same as sort of a brand statement or a brand identity. The unfair advantage, This is a piece where you have developed an economic moat, some kind of differentiation that makes it difficult for others to copy what you're doing or to compete with you. It's not a bad thing to have competitive advantage. An unfair advantage might be a patent. It might be subject matter expertise. You know how to do something no one else knows how to do. It might be contract relationships with customers that are very hard to replicate. Businesses without an unfair advantage are typically relegated to competing on the basis of price, and that's difficult. So think about that in terms of those are things you need to develop. Then you think about the cost structure. What is it going to cost to pull this business model off? What does it cost for labor, for product? What's the bill of materials, that kind of thing? How are you going to make money? What's the revenue model going to be? Is it going to be an upfront purchase? Is there going to be some kind of annuity associated with maintenance and support? What's the revenue model? Key metrics are, how are you going to measure success? What are those milestones or important measures that you're going to take that say, we're on the right track? We've got this number of customers. We've got this amount of revenue. We've got this sort of, these number of likes or whatever it happens to be. Channels are how you go to market. Are we going to sell directly? We can do online marketing. We have to build a sales force. So this single canvas identifies all the important stuff about your business. This is the modern day embodiment of a business plan. It also gives you a really good outline to talk about your business. If you can speak coherently and succinctly about each one of these, you can do a 60-second pitch, you can do a 10-minute presentation. This gives you all the headlines that people would care about. And there is kind of a recommended order, although there's no wrong order to do this. You kind of work this from the outside in. So you start with the problem and the target customers, and then you sort of work your way in towards the middle as you go through it. Problem and customers are the first two things that you should focus on. Because if you get information as you're out in the marketplace making 100 different contacts that it's not really a problem that any customer you can find care about, you can stop, right? You don't need to continue. If you get really strong indications that yes, appears to be a real problem and there are real customers that are interested, then you can begin to develop the rest of the canvas. Questions about that? Okay, so where does it apply? Now we're talking in the context here of startup and new venture, but some of you, as you go through your collegiate career, as you get into business, you may not do a startup right off the bat. But this same methodology would apply if you were in a nonprofit, if you're in a research institution, if you're in a large corporation. This is a way of managing the development of a new product or new service in a very efficient way. The mindset of being entrepreneurial is exactly that. It's exactly that. And now I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So when Ash Maurya thought of the book Running Lean and his form of Lean Canvas, he actually used his own tool. So this is a little bit redundant, but it's the Lean Canvas for the Lean Canvas. The thing I would highlight here is look how short the statements are. You're writing in there the 9 guesses that you have about each one of these components of the business. You kind of go through it pretty quickly. And then you iterate, right? You go through a number of different cycles with this to figure these things out. I have had clients that have gone through this about 20 times, and they maintain all the versions of the Lean Canvas so that they can show their pathway and their growth as time goes on. In addition, you can modify the Lean Canvas to include important things like Tom Shoes did with a purpose. This was a social venture that had a very strong interest in trying to figure out how to get shoes to those that were less fortunate in developing countries. So they'd put the purpose right up top. And they also added an impact, a label down here as well. So you can modify, there's no wrong way to use the Lean Canvas. You can make these kind of modifications depending upon the circumstance. We'll talk a little bit about customer development. I'd recommend as you go through this that you download a free PDF of a book called Talking to Humans. This is written by a guy with a funny name named Giff Constable. And I always think of, it sounds like something that ought to be on, Marvel comic. Giff Constable, I don't know, I guess they wanted to call him Sheriff Constable, but called him Giff instead. But it's an interesting name. This guy is the one that talks about practically how you go through and ask really good questions. So there's something called confirmation bias, and that is you're so in love with your own idea, your own product, your own service, that you ask questions that are going to reinforce your thoughts about what truth is. But in this book, he talks about how to eliminate that confirmation bias so that you ask open-ended questions without any preconception or without any bias towards trying to drive the answers you get one direction or the other. If you can do this well, it will allow you to learn things that you couldn't learn any other way. In the South, if you went to somebody and said, "What do you think of my baby?" They're not going to tell you your baby's ugly, right? They're just not. People are nice. They might say, "Bless your heart," right? But they're not going to tell you the kid's ugly. So you've got to be able to ask questions to extract the truth from people that don't want to hurt your feelings. And that's what this book tells you how to do in Talking to Humans. It's a great book, and it's free, which is even better. Okay, so now to the fun part. How many people are tired of hearing me talk, other than me? You can raise your hand, it's okay. So now we're going to do some real work. You're in teams based on the tables you're in, and you've got a lean canvas in front of you. And what we're going to do, so that we don't have to go through the ideation process, is we're going to start with an assumption that you've just inherited this pedal cart. You've just inherited it. It's an asset you have. And you want to make use of that asset in some kind of meaningful way. So what I want you to do for about the next 15 minutes, in your group, go through a pass on the lean canvas. Figure out what problem or what unmet need you can solve. Figure out who your customers are. Just fill this guy out. And this is your asset right here. It's a pedal cart. You could do anything with it. You can assume that you could do anything with it in any geography. You've got exactly one of these. And the only restriction you had from the person that gave you the asset is they want to see this put to some kind of productive use that will solve a problem. So go ahead and get after it. And I'm here and the team is here to give you a hand as you go through it if you have any questions.
Our problem is we're looking for like good areas, popular places where there's a lot of like well-known food places and a lot of local hole-in-the-walls as well. So we want to like bring people more like insight to the hole-in-the-wall restaurants. So we targeted like New York City as an example, like the metropolitan area towards like the tourists and like people like recently moving to New York City that don't know much about like the food, like the local food.
And how you can like really experience the cultural aspects through, they're kind of like unique blends and how things taste in that area. Like we have a cultural aspect of New York style pizza or Chicago style pizza, but how can you really experience that into a place that somebody might have grown up there, and so they can incorporate it in their business.
So basically what we're doing with the cart is like the cart that goes around the city, and it's just like an informational like food stand as well. So when like it passes by and people are like looking for a place to eat, it's either like the popular places are too crowded and they want like the local food. They like find the cart and like the person will like let them know like local places like to eat depending on like what kind of food they're looking for. And they'll also like the local hole in the walls will pay them to advertise like their place because that's what they're wanting. So they'll have like even food samples. So when the people are like, well, what kind of food is it? Well, it's like Mediterranean or Italian. And they like give them a little food sample of like a popular thing they might have there. And as far as like direction goes, like they'll have maps and everything. Advertisements will be like on the stand, and they can just like point them in that direction.
So who do you think your customers will be? What do you think about the customer segments?
Definitely like new people moving to New York City that don't know much about the area, and tourists.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, keep walking us through it. Take us through all the other the cells on the canvas.
So our solution for our problem is sponsorship, obviously by the hole-in-the-wall places. So they come to us or we go to them and ask them if we can do this for them. And then the information booth, as Chloe described earlier, how we are going to be using this cart specifically for advertisements on the side of the cart and food samplings. The unique value proposition we are going to be giving insight into the cultural aspect of a specific area of New York City or New York City as a whole, and then providing a service as to what we are going to be doing within that specific region. And a very broad aspect on how New York culture is impacting this business and how we are able to bring those businesses that most people don't know of unless you live in that general vicinity, and how that if you experience this place, you'll really get a taste of New York or whatever metropolitan city you want to apply this to. The unfair advantage, so we are going to secure our company by including in our contract with the advertisement with that specific business that we are the only company allowed or given permission to for this specific
Like to
investment.
promote the food that way. Like we're the only people that can like do the cart and.
Okay.
Exactly. And our channels are going to be, we're thinking about, eventually adding an app to it or maps, and then, just riding around. People look at it, they want to talk to you, so they holler at you or whatever. And our revenue streams are through the advertisements and the sponsorships by the local companies. And the cost structure is, we're not specifically using a price on the customer that walks up to us, but also by the company that is paying tax.
But cost, you're going to have some labor for somebody to drive it and whatever kind of operating costs and permits and that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, how are you going to measure progress with key metrics?
Progress, we're going to be asking the companies, since you've asked us to incorporate this into our business, has your general customer input gone up? Have your business, has your business gone up, basically?
Well, so that could be a key performance indicator for the business, and that's a good thing to measure. That's an outcome of them working with you.
Exactly.
But sometimes on a key metric, you'll think about how many customers have you signed up, right? How much revenue have you achieved as a business? That's kind of the way we think about that.
And has that revenue increased since you have done this?
Exactly. All right. Good job. Well done.
Hi, I'm Cole, and I represent Beachtail Data Analytics. I have to plug that really quick. And we've got a little idea for this cart. What we wanted to do is we wanted to convert it into a classic idea, just a little popcorn cart, something to push around, make a little bit of money on the side, and even sell smaller items off of it, like just candy or water bottles or something like that. And what we decided to do is stick with an area that we actually know the market for, an area that we know, like the square around Bentonville, something that is very lacking in small goods and easy to market items. So what we wanted to do is take this cart and sell out advert space on it and make a little bit of money off of that to help pay for the costs like licenses, to pay for the food, upkeep, taxes, and operating costs, as well as labor. Which leads us into what I would like to say is our most unfair advantage, in that there is no competition in the area. Everything around there is restaurants or coffee shops or bars, and there's nothing to really compete with something that's just selling small, easy to purchase, easy to make, fast, and light food. Our customers are pretty universal. I mean, who's not going to buy popcorn or candy if they just don't want to sit down at Flying Fish for an hour and a half? And our revenue stream is going to be very incredibly easy to monitor. It's also how we're going to kind of flag how far a business is advancing in the long run. Say we start out at making $300 a week, very low profits. Within a year, if say we made $1,000 per month building off of it,
I can do that.
that's very easy to track and improve on. And with that, who wants to invest in it?
So before I invest, tell me again what problem it is that you're solving with this kiosk solution.
There's absolutely nothing in the area that has light, quick, easy snacks. Everything there is a restaurant or a coffee shop. If you just want to get something small, pop in for a bit, you got to go to a Walmart.
So it's lack of availability. Other than maybe the neighborhood market, there's nothing. And this is mobile. It's where you can kind of go where the people may be congregating, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Good job. Well done. Next up. I didn't move quickly enough on the picture. I'll get one now. Whenever you're ready.
All right, so
what we did with our little bike thing is we made it into an organic, freshly made ice cream thing. So you guys all seen it where the guys get the little scoops and push the ice cream as it freezes. We were thinking about doing that with that and putting it on our beach because it's an extremely hot area and people like cold things and it goes to you practically. The problem, people are hot at the beach and they're not really wanting to walk around. You're sitting there getting tan, you don't want to get up. So as the thing goes by, you see it and you call it out, you go give them money or they'll come to you, ask that you get what you want, and boom. Key metrics, we want to try and break even within the first 3 weeks. Ice cream isn't really expensive in the first place, so getting the revenue is quite easy with the population at the beach. Our revenue stream would probably be the ice cream and fresh fruit that comes with it, because we're going to integrate the fresh fruit with the ice cream. The unfair advantage we got is it's a debt-free cart. We don't have to pay anything for it, so it's there already. Also, we go to customers. Our competition would be like ice cream trucks and ice cream shops around the beach. We're on the beach right there, so we already go to you. And our cost structures, we have to pay for everything you need for ice cream. So you need like the cones, the toppings, the napkins, the plates, permit for being on the beach, and just the materials to make the ice cream itself.
Okay, well done. Good job. And maybe do gelato or something cool like that, right? Rather than regular ice cream. That's great. Who's next? Who's ready? You ready? Come on. And you're last, right? You're the last group? Have I got that right? Okay. Whenever you're ready, fire away.
So the one problem that we wanted to address with this cart is that we thought that like restaurants are too expensive to start up. And so we solved that by finding a way to manufacture and distribute this cart to new business owners or people who are wanting to start a restaurant. So our solution is we're really solving it by creating a low risk opportunity for people who want to start the restaurant but don't have enough money. We have unique value because these things are easy to transport, really, and it is low cost for those people wanting to start a restaurant but don't want to invest anywhere from $25,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars to start a restaurant. Our unfair advantage, we plan to patent this cart and make it easy to distribute. As far as we could tell with limited research time, there's not something like this on the market that's easy to access within like 10, 15 minutes of research online. And so we plan to do that. We'll talk about how we plan to do that in channels. Our revenue stream as we manufacture this, our markup on that will be our revenue stream as we sell those food trucks. Key metrics, well, let's see, cost structure. We'll have manufacturing costs is probably going to be one of the biggest things. Patent costs and that kind of thing are going to be big, and then however we choose to distribute them, shipping will be a big cost. Let's see, key metrics. Really, we need to measure the sales and set goals for what we want our sales to be able to break even on really the manufacturing, how much that's going to cost the initial investment to get in there. And then our channels is really, we want to focus on advertising through this online and through like blogs, or even there's a Rome convention in Las Vegas, which is like a food truck convention. So kind of finding that food truck person niche and then being able to concentrate there online, and so that they can start their business with low cost.
And so your basic assertion here is the problem is that the failure rate in restaurants is really high because it's capitally intensive. And so you're giving somebody that wants to be a restaurateur an easy way to get into that market, less risky.
Yeah.
Is that the basic assertion? So if I wanted to do boardwalk fries with Idaho potatoes, you'd be the guy I'd come to, right?
Yeah.
Well, good job. Well done. Good job. We didn't give you nearly enough time to go through that with a lot of depth, but you can kind of see how the process works, right? And you can also see that across the four groups, There was a very different approach to how you might use an asset to solve a problem. But you get a sense of how useful this tool can be? How useful it can be? So that was the idea, and you all did a good job on that. We've got about 15 minutes left. Rather than going through, there's a bunch of other material here that we'll make sure that you get in the slide deck. I'm instead going to show you a couple more videos on good presentation techniques. Now, to your credit, you all did pretty well, given a limited amount of time to practice. But I'm going to show you a couple of different clips on really good presentation methods for 60-second pitches and for longer presentations. Let me skip down to the bottom here. All right. Okay, here we go. So we'll first start, I think this first one I'm going to show you is actually Guy Kawasaki, Chief Evangelist from Apple.
So before there's an epidemic of Meniere's disease in the venture capital industry, I came up with the 10-20-30 rule. This is the 10-20-30 rule. You should have 10 slides in your PowerPoint pitch. 10, not 50. I don't care if you have curve jumping, paradigm shifting, P2P, Google AdWords, social network, optimized, SQL-based way to sell dog food online. 10 slides. That's all we can handle. Those 10 slides you should be able to give in 20 minutes. You may have a 1-hour meeting, but you're using a Windows laptop. It's going to take you 40 minutes to make it work with the projector. All right? 20 minutes. And the smallest font you should use is 30 points. You see 20, 14, and 12. You should use 30 points for 2 reasons. First, the kind of people you're pitching to looks like that. The second reason is by having a 30-point font, you can put a lot less text. This forces you to actually know your presentation and just put the core of the text on your slide. If you need to put 8 points or 10 points fonts up there, it's because you don't know your material. If you start reading your material because you don't know your material, the audience is very quickly going to figure out that you are a bozo. They're going to say to themselves, this bozo is reading his slides. I can read faster than this bozo can speak. I will just read ahead. If you don't buy that 30 points is the right font size, I will give you an algorithm. Give you an algorithm. Find out who the oldest person is in the audience, divide his or her age by 2. That's your optimal font size. Okay? Unless you're pitching to 16-year-olds, don't use the 8-point font.
Important to care about a pitch.
So that's a key point. So why does it matter? Why does it matter? 3 different constituencies that you're going to talk to as an entrepreneur. One is if you want to sell a product, sometimes you may need to do a PowerPoint presentation, particularly if you're going to sell into an enterprise. You're going to have a bit of a story. Whether it's Prezi, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's just some kind of graphic or product demonstration, you've got to be ready to communicate effectively. Everything in entrepreneurship is tied to selling. I'm an introverted person. I don't like getting up in front of people. I'm uncomfortable. I've had to get over that over the years. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to get comfortable in talking to people, building relationships, and communicating effectively, because people got a limited amount of time. It's super important. It's super important. So a pitch to an investor who has very little time, they might see 1,000 deals in a year. You've got to be economical in the way you use their time. Short attention span. They want to hear just the stuff they need to hear so that they know whether or not they want to learn more about what you're doing. Now, he said 10-20-30 rule. As with all things, that was from about 2006. It's really the 10-10-30 rule. You really only have 10 minutes a lot of times in an investor presentation. So think about what are the 10 meaningful slides we could put together that will tell the story. And interestingly, there's 9 boxes on the lean canvas. So if you think about that being a pretty good outline to tell a story, use that as the format for how you're going to talk about what you're doing. Simple messages, images, charts, graphs, you're selling. Make it interesting. Bring it to life. Pitching is really important. The next thing we'll talk about is sometimes you don't even have 10 minutes. Sometimes there's going to be a very important person that you're going to see on an elevator or on the street. And you want to kind of bend their ear. You want to get a meeting with them. But they're super busy. They're in a hurry. Maybe you've got them on the phone. So you've got to be able to do that 60-second elevator pitch. It takes everything you just heard from Guy Kawasaki and it compresses it into 60 seconds. So we're going to see some guidance and 2 more videos on how to do that well. And by the way, we've got a competition called Idea Fame Live, which is a place where you can go win $1,000, either from a judge's choice or a people's choice, and compete. And it happens locally all the time. So sometimes if you got a really good idea, come out and pitch it and you might win money. So here we go.
And use that money to start your business.
Exactly.
"60-second pitch." You don't have a lot of time. 60 seconds is quick. We like 60 seconds because it's a soundbite. And in today's world, we're in a soundbite economy. The 60 seconds you have to get somebody's attention in an elevator, somebody you meet on the street, the 2 to 3 sentence email that you send to get someone's attention. You've got to hook them. Okay, 15 seconds, you and the team. Why? We start with this because you have to build your credibility with me, the audience, if I'm going to pay attention to what you're going to say. So whether it's a 60-second pitch, a 30-second VC presentation, you have to get my attention up front. You don't have to be the world's expert on this, but you have to intrigue me that you know something unique about this area. And then I'm interested in paying attention. Hey, this person has something interesting to say, and they're credible. 60 seconds, you and the team. Next 15 seconds, the problem you're solving. Who are you solving it for? Why is it important? Why is it painful for them today? So here's the way you do this. We call it a day in the life. You paint a picture in my mind of what it's like for a customer today and what pain they have to go through to do whatever it is that you're going to help them with today. That's the best way to illustrate the problem. Okay, now, next 15 seconds. Unique solution. What's your unique approach to solving this? How do you take this complicated, painful problem and make it simple? Remember, the best products take something complicated and make it really simple. Now, again, use this day in the life. Paint a picture in my mind about your customer and how blissful their life is now that they're using your solution. It's the before and after, the problem, the solution. Last 15 seconds, the market opportunity. And this is where most people blow it. They get you excited, they're credible, they're solving an interesting problem, they have a unique solution, but they don't tell you how big the market is. So I walk away as a busy investor and I say, oh, that was interesting, but I don't have time to go research the market, so I assume it's not a very big market opportunity, or you would have told me, and I forget about it. Paint me the picture of how big the market is. Here's a really simple way to do it. If you have a service and you're marketing it within a particular city, tell me what the market opportunity is within that city, and then tell me how many cities like that there are in the world. I can do the math, and I can see, wow, this is a pretty big market here. I should be interested in talking further to you. So your 60-second pitch is not about you. Your 60-second pitch is about your audience and hooking them, getting them interested. First 15 seconds, the team, you've built credibility with me, I'm listening. Next 15 seconds, the problem. Oh, it sounds like an interesting problem and it's pretty painful for people. Next 15 seconds, this team has come up with a unique solution, a way to solve this problem that I haven't thought of before. Last 15 seconds, boy, this is such a big market opportunity, I really should be interested in talking more to this team. If you do that successfully, I'm not looking at my iPhone, I'm paying attention to you. Successful 60-second pitch. There you have it.
We'll kill this off. So what did he forget? What did he forget? It's a good outline. What did he forget? What's the one fundamental thing you always want to do at the end of that type of presentation? Somebody's going to know. Who's ever sold anything here? Anybody ever sold anything? You sold? No? You guys have sold? What's the one thing you do? You've just taken up 60 seconds of this billionaire's time.
Contact information.
innovation.
What's the ask, right? What do you want them to do next? The call to action. So you have to ask at the end. So everything he outlined there is great. But you want to say, and here's what I like to do. I'd like to follow up with you. I'd like to come do a 30-minute presentation. I'd like to show you more product details. Never waste someone's time talking about what you're doing without asking them for something at the end. Now, it doesn't mean buy my product. It means, hey, can I tell you more? With a 60-second presentation, you're asking for more of their time, the most valuable resource they have, so that you can tell them more about what you're doing. So we're going to get one more look at this. We're going to take one more look at another way of thinking about this. And this is for an elevator pitch for something that's a little more technology intensive, specifically for healthcare. And I think it's some good context.
The art of the elevator pitch. What we want to do is give you a surefire way of, in under 60 seconds, making sure that the person you're speaking to or the audience you're speaking to truly understands what you do and how you do it and why they want to learn more. So there's 3 things I want you to remember. The first thing, tell an inspiring story using this 6-step process. You're going to say your name and background. You're going to talk about the challenge that you observed or perceived or are aware of in the market. You're going to actually mention who your target customer is, not 100 target customers, your one target customer, what the company does to create value for those customers, and then what your business does and how you make money, your business model, and then you're going to end with a goal or something inspiring that's going to get them wanting more and learning more about your company. The second thing we want you to remember is that you have to deliver with energy and passion. It's really important you don't just get up and read a paragraph. You have to memorize it, and you have to say it so many times and practice it so many times that your energy comes across. People feel your excitement and they want some of that energy. And the last piece, do it in under a minute. 60 seconds. Could take you 20, 30 minutes to sit down with the template and really think through strategically how you want it to flow, and then just start practicing and ask for feedback. Your goal at the end of the day, and you're going to know if you achieve success, if a high school student or a parent or grandparent or a child understands what you do.
You can all kind of lean on the coaches and lean on each other.
All right. Let's see where we are here. That's where we want to be. Nope. Come on back. Bear with me a second there. There we go. Okay. Okay, so at this point, just want to answer any questions you might have. That hour and a half went by pretty quick. What questions do you have based on what you heard today? Fire away. This is your opportunity for Stump the Chump. Anybody got anything? Yes, sir.
So, with Startup Junkie, how do you guys make your profits?
How do we make money?
Because you offer free
We've got a
consultancy.
nice business model.
Yeah. So it's a crazy business model. Never do our business model. How's that for a piece of advice? What we do is, one thing I learned over a course of 30-something years of being involved in both in large companies and small and running a bunch of startups, is the one thing that every startup and small business has in common is they have no money, right? They have no money. But they need help. They need the kind of help they could get from McKinsey Consulting or from any other big management consultancy. So we came up with a model where they get that kind of quality of help at no cost. Now, how we did that was we had to convince large foundations like the Walton Family Foundation, the Small Business Administration, the City of Fayetteville, the University of Central Arkansas, and others that there was real value in supporting a startup and small business scene. Now, why is there real value? It's because somewhere between 2 out of every 3 and 85% of all net new jobs that are created in any given economy come from small business and startups. So if you can get those startups that have very high failure rate to the point where they're actually successful and they're hiring people, it's good for the economy. So it's a weird business model where everything we do is free and it's paid for by a third party. Good question. Yes, sir.
We talk a lot about kind of like building businesses around problems.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to easily recognize problems in our community?
So you have to be a great observer. You have to be a detective, right? And it's reading lots of books, staying in tune with the news, just being observant, thinking about situations in your own life where you say, golly, I wish somebody would do that better. And then researching it a little bit to find out, why isn't somebody doing that better? Could I do that better? So being really curious is the key, and being a good observer. And when you think of something, sometimes you might wake up in the middle of the night when you're You're unclouded by all the other things of the day, or when you're in the shower in the morning or whatever. If you have a thought and you begin to go down that path of wondering why things work the way they work, write it down and then go do a little bit of investigation. It's all about application of scientific method to see whether or not your perception of a potential problem is really true. So be a good observer, I'd say, is a big part of it. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about pricing. So this is for myself, it's for students too. So, they have an idea, they start something, they're experimenting. At what point do you start charging people for it?
As early as possible in the process. So there's, online, there's this whole theory around we're going to try to build an audience, we're going to offer a bunch of stuff for free. That works really, really well if you happen to be in Silicon Valley and you've got lots of money that you can pour into the problem. Everywhere else, get to the point that you're solving a problem as early enough in that process that people will actually pay for it. And if they won't pay for it, it's going to be a very difficult business model to make work. Now for us, using us as a case, we couldn't do what we did for free. We had to be able to pay our employees, but we had to find a constituency that saw the value and the outcomes that we were going to be able to deliver. So don't give your services away. Figure out as early as possible the quickest path to revenue to get someone to pay. And when you establish your pricing, you can't compete on price as a new start typically as a small business. So you're much better to start off with something that's high value, that's going to be higher price. And as you get to volume, you can lower price. But unless you're Walmart, you already have that kind of scale, it's very difficult as a small business to compete on price. Did that help?
Yeah.
As early as you can charge for it, charge for it.
How do you determine pricing?
There's lots of different ways to do it. And I guess part of it is spending a lot of time as a follow-up to the Lean Canvas process, asking people, doing comparable analysis with other similar offerings. What do they charge? Could I get away with charging more? How do I know? So surveys, talking to people, looking at comparable offerings, that type of thing. In the beer business, I'll give you a good example, something I know a little bit about. If you're in craft beer, and none of you partake in that, thankfully, you're too young for that right now, but if you're in the craft beer business, it's local, it's artisan, it's perceived as being higher value, so you're not going to offer it the same price as Budweiser or Milwaukee's Best or Coors. It might be $10 a six-pack. You can get away with offering something at a higher price because it's perceived as having a higher value. So part of it is there's sort of a visceral emotional aspect of it. Part of it is just testing what the market will actually pay based on the perceived value that you develop in a brand. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So after business takes off, what's one of the major things that will make it start to slow down or crash?
Not being true to the culture is a big deal. Not maintaining all that culture. Not thinking as a founder about a succession plan. It's important to figure out how to work yourself out of a job. So building that next layer of leadership so that you don't have to do everything like you did before. Not paying really close attention to what your customers and the market is telling you. There's all kinds of things that have become obsolete because people didn't see something else coming. Talk to Sears and Roebuck, Kmart, JCPenney, Macy's. There's all kinds of retail roadkill, really, from the fact that they didn't see these trends coming in retail and online as quickly as they've come. So paying attention to the market and constantly innovating, I think, are big parts of it as well. Sir?
How much of a role does social media play when you're starting a business?
Social media and earned media in general, in other words, things that you don't necessarily have to pay for or pay a lot for, has democratized business. And what I mean by that is you can build, I'll give you a good example. One of your, probably not a classmate anymore, I think graduated 2 years ago, developed a YouTube channel and had 60,000 subscribers. What's that called? Scattervault? Something like that. But anyway, and he talks about hardware and stuff on there. So he built this big audience of people. It's hugely valuable and it's cost effective. So if you can develop a skill in social media, in building interest around what you're doing, that's a way to generate a lot of interest. And this is what you guys do. How big do you think social media is?
It's basically the basis for our entire business at the moment.
Right.
We do data analytics too. We haven't had a single person come to us about that.
Yeah.
But social media can be a real differentiator for people, right? Getting that, helping build the brand.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir.
How do you reform culture? Like, if you haven't had a basis of culture in the past on an already existing company that may be big and fairly successful,
Yeah.
how can you be more successful reforming?
So it's a good question. And cultures are gonna constantly evolve in a business. As new people come in, the culture is going to change a little bit. You hope that it's changing the right way, that it's not mutating the wrong way. But it's something where you have to have somebody in the business that's kind of the keeper of the culture. Use Walmart as an example. Don Soderquist was called the keeper of the culture. He was somebody that was, in many ways, the embodiment of what Sam Walton had in mind for the many years that he was there. And I think it's that constant reinforcement. It's not to say that you stay static, because cultures need to modify. You just hope that they're modifying in a positive way. It's something that the leadership has to pay attention to, and they have to believe that it's not just marketing, that it's really kind of central and core to what makes the business what it is. Paying attention to it is the answer.
So let's say you're trying to grow your business outside of an area that you've already got culture for.
Uh-huh.
So how do you look? Do you look for a place that already has the same culture that you like have your business based out of, or do you look for like a totally different culture?
So in that case, you're thinking from the standpoint of geography. How do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You say you're trying to expand your business.
Oh, so good example. Let's just say that you're a videography company that is focused on a college town. We'll use that as an example, something that you understand. And you know something about the demographics, and you know something about the buying habits and the whole vibe. And so in the case of Fayetteville, it's a Division I college town. It's about 80,000 people. You could, just through some research, find out there's probably 300 other communities across the country that are going to have a similar vibe. They're a college town. They're about the same size. You could then investigate each one of those and say, do our assumptions and our hypothesis about Fayetteville apply in this new location? Are people wired the same way? Are the demographics similar? Could we have the same offering there, and would it resonate the same way? And you'll find out there will be some similarities. They won't all fit, but that's how you go about doing that. And it's interesting you ask that question, because as we think about how we're going to expand Startup Junkie, we try to look for places that are interested in building a startup scene, that are non-coastal, not on either coast, middle of the country, that have an interest in looking at talent and capital and entrepreneurial culture and community engagement. We look at that as kind of our 4 pillars, and we try to figure out is there a good match? Is there the will there, the entrepreneurial will to make something happen? It's a good question. Sir?
With social media, say you have a product but you don't know which your target audience is, but you want to get on social media.
Mm-hmm.
How do you determine which social media to get on? Because we all know social media has the majority of a specific age group.
Yeah.
How do you determine what age group you're specifically going?
It's a good question. So for example, if you want to go to a younger set, you better be thinking about Snapchat and Instagram. If it's old folks like us are on Facebook now or LinkedIn. So knowing something about how that's segmented, and you think about what your product or service is, it will probably tell you, well, we really ought to focus more on Facebook ad spend, because this is the demographic that's on Facebook. And part of it is through some upfront research and then experimentation. Find out where are you getting the leads? Where are things starting to resonate? Where is all that kind of stuff happening? There's no replacement for upfront research and then experimentation to find out. And you can do most of that pretty cost effectively. Other questions? Are we about time's up? Well, listen, thanks for being part of the class and part of the studio audience for all the K through 12 teachers all across the state. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.